welcome back to our channel. So in today's video, we will learn about JavaScript objects with the help of different examples. So let's get started. So in the JavaScript data type, which we have seen in our part 1 of this tutorial, you learn about the 7 different type primitive data types, and here you are going to learn about the 8th data type, which is a JavaScript object. So JavaScript object is non-primitive data type that allows you to store multiple collection of data, right? So if you are familiar with the other programming languages, JavaScript objects are a bit different. You do not need to create a classes in order to create objects. So remember this point, right? So let's see. The first we see the syntax. So I'm going to create a one class file over here and going to save this. Give the name this object dot js. So this is the name I have given. Now let's write down student equal to so this is so here the student is an object and that stores values such as strings and numbers, like you can see over here, right? So let's see JavaScript object declaration syntax. Okay, so this is the example. Let me write down. So how we are going to give by the const, and I give the object name equal to curly braces, inside this key1 value 1, key2 value 2, value 2. Let me put it inside the comment block. Right, so this is object name is defined. An object is a defined. Each member of an object is a key value pair separated by comma and enclosed in curly braces. For example, let's take an example. So you can see over here that person is my object name, and these are the properties, which the name and the age. Okay, now how we are going to use the type? If you want to know the type use, then we can use the type of, which we have already seen in our part 2. And if I run it, let me run this. So you can see the type of the object, right? So you can also define an object in a single line. How we can define it? So let's see. I can define the same. So this is how I can define it, right? So in this example, you can see name and age are keys and John and 20 are values respectively. There are other ways to declare an object in JavaScript. Okay, so let's, and we'll see very soon about those things. So now let's talk about the JavaScript property. Let me write down what is basically JavaScript property. Okay, so let's say let person one. So here you can see the name John and age. These are the properties of object person one, right? And how we are going to accessing these properties? So the syntax would be object name dot key. Okay, so if I want to say that I need to read the name, so what I'm going to do, console dot log inside this. First, I need to provide a name person. Then I click on the dot operator and I give the name of my property. So this is the property name which I have. Now let's run this and we'll see what would be the result we get. So you can see the result is 1. But if I change it as a person 1, my output will be changed and it will show as a Sam. So you can see Sam over here, right? So this is how we use access the object properties. There is another way using it, which is using bracket notation. So let me write down using bracket notation. Okay, and how we are going to do that? Let me write it down. Object name dot, not dot. We are going to use a bracket. Under the bracket in double quotes, we write the property name. Property. And let's see the example of this. So I say console.log to print the value. I use a person dot, not dot. Under the bracket, in the double quotes, I write age. So this is how I'm going to use it. Okay, and now let's run it. And we'll see what would be my output. So let me clear this and say when I run it again, you can see the value is 20 is coming over here. So in this way, this is another way of accessing the properties. Now let's talk about JavaScript nested objects. So for that, let me create another file and save it first. Right. So now let's talk about that. So first let me write it down. So this is my code. Okay, so over here what is the student is my object and there are the property. The name is the property which is a data type of string. Age is another property which is a number. Mark is another property which have a values of science and maths. Okay, so now in a simple way, if I have used a nested object property to display, so how I'm going to use it? If I say students dot marks, so it will provide me the science 70, the key value pair, the math 75, this is another key value pair. But if I want to specify a property of nested object, in that case this is how I'm going to use the student, my property mark, and again the property of this. So let's see what would be my the result is. So I say I run it and you can see science 70, math 75. This is how it's providing me the details. Okay, now this is the about the object. Now let's talk about, let me take in another file where which I'm going to save as js object methods. Okay, so we'll discuss about that if I have a method in my object, so how is going to use it, right? So this is my method. You can see the greet is my method. So this is how we write it. Okay, remember this one. So if I and I have to call it, so I need to use person dot greet in this way, and it will show me the results. So let's see. Let me clear this first. Node JS. Here you can see the hello, right? So here a function is used as a value for the greet key. That's why we need to use person dot greet, which you can see over here, instead of person dot greet to call the function inside the object. So remember this part, that how we are going to use function inside the object. Okay, a JavaScript method is a property containing a function declaration. So in our next topic, which we are going to cover, we will learn about the JavaScript methods in details. Okay, so let's see. So let me create a one another file. Okay, let me do in this one also. So I have a one object which is called name as a property. Inside that I have a one function which is a greet. Okay, so how we are going to use, so let's see how we are going to access the methods, accessing object methods. So this is how we going to always use the accessing of the methods. And let me write down a syntax for your convenience. Accessing object methods. Okay, and the syntax is object name dot method key. Okay, so this is how we are going to use it, right? So let's take another example of that. Okay, and we'll see. So if I use the same, so if I want to console dot log over here and put the name, okay, and another one I write console, not the console. In this way, I write down just person dot name, and another one I write down person dot, I would say, greet. This is, and if I run it, and we'll see what would be my result. So you can see hello and hello, right? So this is how we are going to use it. Now JavaScript, let's talk about the JavaScript built-in methods. Okay, we'll take some examples. So I say let declaring it number equal to 23.34. Okay, another let result, I would say, equal to pass. This is, and inside that I give the number. Okay, and if I say console.log, print the result. Okay, and we'll see the result over here is a 23. Okay, now let's talk about how we, if I want to add a method to a JavaScript, then how can I do that? So let's take an example. Let me create another file, and I would say adding method to object. So this is the one. So let me create, I would say, a student. Okay, this is the object I have created. Okay, now I say student dot name. I'm writing in this way. Then I say student. Now I'm adding a function greet equal to function, and I would say console dot log hello, and let's say now run it student dot greet, right? So this is, so over here let me run it, and then I'll explain what exactly we are doing over here. So you can see we have printed the hello. How what is happen over here? So what I have done, I have declared a one object called a student, and the object doesn't have any property inside that. So what I am going to do, I have used the object name, okay, object name, and the property which I need to add into that and provide the value. And the same for the function itself. I have provide the object name dot my method name, and I have given the function which I have given the console.log hero, and in this way I can add my methods or a property into my object itself. Okay, now let's talk about another important thing, which is we call as this keyword. So let me write down over here script this keyword. Okay, so to access a property of an object from within a method of the same object, you need to use this keyword. Let's see some of the examples of that. So let me write it down. So what I'm going to do over here, first let me create an object first. I'm creating an object. So this is my object which I have created. Now inside this I have a function which is called a greet. Okay, writing down the function as you know the syntax, and I'm writing console.log and saying this is that's okay, and I'll give the name this dot. So you can see it's showing me the property of object, this name over here. Now I'm going to call person dot greet. This is my function which I'm going to call, and if I run it, you can see this is John. So this is how we use a this keyword. Okay, so remember that to access a property of an object within a method of the same object. Okay, so what I need to do, so in this, for this object I have this function. So in this function, if I required a value of the property of the same object, so I need to use a this keyword over here. Okay, so remember that in JavaScript this keyword when used with the object's method refer to the object. This is beyond to an object, bound to an object. Okay, so let's take some another example over here. In the same way, I'll say, let me write it down over here. I say this is my person one, and what I'm going to do over, so you can see this dot name and the same property I'm calling it. Okay, surname over here. So this surname is basically a variable inside my function. Okay, so I have defined the scope of this surname inside the function only. So now let's run it and we'll see what would be the result is. So you can see the name is John Doe, right? So this is how we use the function, the variable, define the variable inside the function, which is an inside of an object. Okay, there's another important topic, okay, which now we are going to cover is the constructor functions, right? So if you remember, if you have some knowledge about the programming language, we know, how the constructors work, but we'll see in JavaScript constructor functions, how they are performed and how they can be used in our programming. So let me save this file, name as JS constructor function. So this is file I have saved it. Okay, so let's first see. So this is the format you can see. So this what I have done. So I have created a once function which is called a name as a person, and I have given the name this dot name and this dot age. Okay, and after that I have to create a object of that construct right? So what I have done over here, I'm using const person equal to new person. Okay, so this is how I have created. Now if I want to run it, so what I need to do, console.log, and if I say person dot, and you can see it's showing me the property of the constructor. So if I say age, let me say age, okay, and if I am going to run it, then see what would be my result. Okay, so my result is 23. So this is how the constructor will work. So let's take another example and we understand that creating a multiple object with the constructor function. So far what we have done it. So let me create a one more function over here. So what I say, this is my function name. Okay, so how I'm going to create a function? This dot read and equal to function. This is how I'm going to, and just write a simple value over here, which is hello. So this is what I have done. I have modified my constructor over here. Okay, and let's see how we are going to. So the constant person one, let me write down over here. So I const person one equal to new person. Okay, another one const person two equal to new person. So this is how I have done the multiple one. And if I say console, let me console dot log say person one dot name, and I can say, let me copy this line instead of writing it, and change object name over here, and let's save it. Okay, now let's run this and we'll see the result. So you can see John and John, right? Now let's talk about more about the JavaScript, this keyword, how it's going to be used. Okay, so in the function you can see what I have done. I have a function where I have given us this dot name, okay, and this dot age and this dot greet, we are using it. Okay, so in JavaScript, when this keyword is used in a constructor function, this refers to the object when the object is created. Okay, so remember this point. So if we are using this keyword in the function, so this refers to the object when the object is created. Okay, so this is how the example we can see over here. Now JavaScript constructor functions with parameters. So let me create another file. Right, so let's see how it's going to work. So for that, if I'm writing a constructor, again function, I'm using the same name person. Now the only difference is I'm giving a person underscore name, person underscore age, person underscore gender. So these are the three parameters which I have to pass in the constructor function, right? So now if I write that this dot name equal to person name, again this dot age equal to person underscore age, and the next one is this dot gender equal to person gender. Okay, and now another function is this dot greet equal to function, and I would write console dot log. Okay, and in this case I'm not going to write a console. I would provide a return and say hi, and I would say this dot name. Okay, so this is what I have done it. Okay, now let's start creating objects. So let's create an object called person1 equal to, I would say, new person. Now I have to provide the value. So let's say Sam 30, sorry, and I will say me, right? Const person2 equal to new person, and I am providing a value common 30 and image. Okay, so this is how I have created an object with the passing parameters, right? So now let's run it. I would say person dot name. Okay, this is what I'm going to do, and same for console dot log for person2 dot name, right? So this is, and then I'm going to run this. You can see Sam and Meena. Okay, so in this example we have passed argument to the constructor function during the creation of the object. Okay, right? So this is how. Now let's talk about the creating a object, create objects, and see the difference between constructor function versus object literal. Okay, so object literal is generally used to create a single object. Okay, let me write it down over here. Object literals are used to create a single object. Okay, but if we talk about constructor function are used to create multiple object. Remember this part, right? So we have seen that, in the previous part, that if I'm using a example, let me take the example of this. Okay, if I say let person equal to, in this way, name Sam. Okay, so this is my object literal. Okay, using object literal. But if I say, let me write down over here the same thing. Okay, in case of, I say function person person, right? And I'm going to create inside this, I would say this dot name equal to Sam, and over here I would say const obj1 equal to new person, right? Or say const obj2 equal to new person, right? So what I have done, I have created multiple objects. Okay, so this is, so another thing is, remember that each object created from the constructor function is unique. You can have the same properties as the constructor function, or add a new property to one particular object, for example. Okay, so example is that if I have function, so let me use this function only. Okay, I'm going to use the same function. Okay, and I would say I have created one. Let me create another file and we'll see the example. Okay, let me save unique object. Okay, dot.js. So in this case, my function is, let me write down the function person. Okay, and this is how I'm going to write this dot name equal to, right. So this is how I have written. Now let's create p1 equal to new person, another let p2 equal to new person. Okay, so this is what I have done. Now I say person p1 dot age. Just remember that. Okay. So what I'm going to do is p1 equal to 30. This is what I have done. Okay. So now this age property is unique to or to person to p1 object and is not available to p2 object. So let's say this is what I have done it. Now if I want to run, okay, so let me write down console dot log and I say p1 dot age. Okay, and the same thing I'll do for p2 and we'll see the difference what will happen. Okay, now I'm going to run it. So you can see 30 and undefined. So why is undefining? Because we this property is not available for p2, right? Because it's uniquely available only for a p1 object. Okay, so this is how we can use it. So this is how we can create a unique object in our case. Okay, so now let's talk about adding properties and methods in an object. Okay, so let me create another file and saying adding property and function object.js. Okay, so now we'll see how we are going to how we are going to add the properties and methods in our existing object. Okay, so for that, this is the example. You can see my construct function is person and I have already two properties, this name and this age. Okay, this is a name and age is my property. Now what I have done, I have created two properties over here, person 1 and the person 2. Now what I'm going to do, like the previous example we have seen, that if I need to add the property, I'm providing a proper object name and the property name which I'm providing, and this is how we are going to add it. For the person 1, I have added also the function over here, and we are going to see how is going to run it. Okay, so this is, and the person 2 we are going to see whether person 2 greet will work or not, because what we have done, we have added this greet function only for project 1, the object 1 itself. So let's run it and we'll see the results over here. Oh, sorry, I have written notes two times. Yeah, so you can see hello, this is printed because of this line, but we are seeing the person dot greet. The person dot greet is not a function. Okay, because we haven't defined a function. Okay, so that is why we are getting a problem over here. Okay, so this is how we are going to add properties and the object. So so far, if you like this video, please subscribe if you still not subscribed, and share. So, and for our channel notification, please hit the like button, and don't forget to click on bell icon so you can get more updates about our videos. Let's go further and we'll see about the JavaScript prototype. So let me create another file over here and I give the name as object prototypes. Okay, so remember that we can also add properties and method to a constructor function using a prototype. So what we have seen so far, that we have created a you know created a object, and using that object we are adding methods or functions or properties to that particular object. But if I want to add you know uh, property or a method in my function, for constructor function, how we are going to do that? Okay, so for that, what we are going to do is we are going to use a function. Let me copy this function from my previous example, so it will be much easier for me to explain. So let me copy this function. I'm going copying this function and the same. Sorry. Right. So this is the function, my constructor function, and these are the objects. So in that case, if you are writing, so I have to write the constructor name. Okay, this is my name. Then I write a dot and write down prototype. You can see the prototype function dot prototype, right? Prototype dot. I have to give the name. Like if I say gender equal to, let's say, male. Okay, so this is what I have done. And now if I'm going to run console dot log, and I would say person 2 dot gender, or I would say console dot log person 1 dot gender. Okay, and we'll see the result. So note, this is, so as you can see, male male. Okay, so this is how we are going to use a, if we want to add uh, property and function in constructor, we use a prototype. Okay, now there are some JavaScript built-in functions, so let me note it down over here, okay, for your reference, so that you can use it, right? Or I'll create a one another file, which would be always a good option, you know, built-in constructor, and I give the name .js also. Now, so let a equal to new object, let b equal to new string, let c equal to new number, let d equal to new boolean. Okay, so these are the way we can use a built-in infrastructure. Okay, so let's take a few examples. Okay, over here quickly. So let me save this. I say const name equal to new string over here, and I provide the name inside this, like say that. Okay, now log, and I would say name, and I'm going to run it. Okay, so let me clear this first terminal, and I'm going to write the name. You can see the string Sam. Okay, so this is how you are going to use the name. Okay, even the same you can use it for another object. Let's say const number equal to new number, and inside this I give them the name, and I say over here console.log and number. And now if I'm going to run it, we'll see what would be the result is. So you can see number 56, right? So this is how we are using it. Okay, so over here I give the recommendation to use primitive data types and create them in a normal way. Okay, such as like if I say const name equal to John. Okay, so I prefer to use in this way. Okay, and you should not declare strings, numbers, and booleans values as object, because they slow down the program. So this is, always remember that, right? This is statement that declaring strings, numbers, and booleans values as object, because they slow down the program. Okay, now there's a one more point you need to remember. In JavaScript, the keyword class was introduced in ES6, okay, which we use as a terminology ES2015, that also used to create objects. Classes are similar to constructor functions in JavaScript. Okay, when we in our coming tutorials, we are going to understand about the JavaScript class, how the classes are using it. Okay, so now let's talk about the JavaScript getter and setters. Let me close all these files. Okay, now let me open the another file over here. So we'll see the getters and setters. So in JavaScript, there are two kind of object properties: data properties and the accessor properties. Remember that data properties and so let me save this first, and I say getter and setters. Okay, let me write it down so you have it in future. Okay, now let's see about the data property. This is my data property. Okay, now what is the accessor property? Accessor property. So in JavaScript, accessor properties are methods that get or set the value of an object. For that, we use these two keywords: get to define a getter method to get the property value, and another one is set to define a setter method to set the property value. Okay, now let's take an example of JavaScript getter. We'll see that. Okay, how it's going to. I say get name, and I say return this dot first name, right? So this is how I use a get over here. Now say okay, what I'm doing over here, accessing data property, right? Now accessing getter method. Now over here student dot get name. Okay, now let's say trying to access a method, like previously we have studied. So I'm writing over trying to access as a method. Okay, let's say dot dog, and how we are going to use it: student dot and get name over here, right? Let's see. Now let's see what are the input we get for all these three statements. So if you can see the first name, okay, we get the first name, okay, and invalid shorthand property initializer, right? So we are getting the problem over here. Okay, so in this example, a getter method get name is created to access the property of an object. Okay, so remember this part. Okay, so now to create a getter method, the get keyword is used. You can see that I have used a get keyword over here to create a getter method. Okay, and also when accessing the value, we access the value as a property. Like you can see the student dot get name as a property we have used. And when you try to access the value as a method, an error is occurred over here. You can see, right? Now let's talk about the setter one. Okay, so let's say I create another object which is called stud and creating, say, like I say, first name equal to, and give a, this is the name I have given. Okay, and inside that, if I need to create a method, setter method, so set is my keyword which I'm going to use, and I say change name, okay, equal change name, and I need to provide a parameter, right? New name, this is the new name, and the function which I am going to, and I say this dot first name equal to new name, right? So this is how I have going to use it. Now let's create it. So the first, if I say console dot log, and inside that I say stud equal dot first name, okay, what it will print? It will print automation. Okay, the next line I find I to change it. So how I'm going to change it? So just to dot, I have a method called change name. So I have the change name, and I'm going to use provide the value of, let's say, ATT. Okay, this is how we are going to use it. And let's say I'm going to print the value again over here as a first name, right? And now we'll see the result over here. So let me clear this first, and let me disable this, comment this line because it will give me error. Okay, now let me run it. Okay, it's giving me some error on line 13, and the line 13 is saying, okay, okay, this is the error which I'm getting it, right? Okay, yeah, my mistake. I have used, instead of colon I have used this line, right? The same thing over here. This is how. Okay, so let's run it again and we'll see. Sam automation att, right? You can see that my previous name was automation, and I have changed it by using a setter. Okay, now let's talk about a few more details. So in this example, the setter method is used to change the value, okay, of an object. You can see that. Okay, to create a setter method, the set keyword we have used, this is the set keyword we have used it. Okay, and remember one thing always, that setter must have exactly one formal parameter like we have used over here. Okay, remember. So now there's another topic which we talk about, the JavaScript object dot define property. So in Java object, we can also use a object dot define property method to add setter and getters, right? So we'll see the example over here. Okay, so let's take the same example over here. Okay, and I would say in the same case like object, if I say write down object dot define properties, not property, it should be a property, define property, right? Inside that I say stud, the object name, comma, okay, change name, or I would say, uh, yes, I can say change name, because I have already. So let me create another, otherwise it make it some conflict over here. So let me create a file, and I will say uh, object define prop dot JS. Okay, now let's do that over here. So for that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create first object. This is my object which I have created. Now let's say I'll give the first name over here, first name equal, not equal to, but another again same over here. Now I have to add, I have to add the setter or a getter by using a object defined property. So how I'm going to do that? Let me say object dot define property. Inside that I'm going to use the object name comma name of my change name. This is the name I have given it. Okay, and I would say now I would say set what I'm going to say, because I need to write a function. So set function, right? Inside this value, okay, and then again this dot first name equal to value. Okay, so this is how I'm going to use it. Okay, so now let's run it, and I will create a object dot define property. What I have to give is object name, which I have given. I give the name, okay, which is get name, and then what I'm going to do, I have to create a function over here. So get, this is again function. Inside the function, what I need to do that, write a this because I need to return, so return this dot first name. Okay, so this is how I have, what I have done, I have created objects over here. Like this is the value I'm going to pass it. Okay, now let's print it the values and we'll see how these things are working. So in this case, the first write down the student dot first name. Okay, and then I would say the same way, student dot change name. I have given change dot name. Okay, and I give the value over here, and we'll see that. Okay, and then we write it down, console dot log, inside that stu dot first name, right? So what I have done over here, I have an object, this is my object. Okay, inside that what I have done, I have created a to by using the object dot define property. This is how we are going to use. When I say this is my object name, and I have given the name, okay, of my method, setter method, and inside that I have provide the value. This is the value which you're going to set it over here. Okay, and the same I have written for get, the get function, and what I'm doing, we are providing a returns. Okay, so in this case, what is going to be write down? It will be write down the value of my first, which I have stored it in the object which is set. And the next case, next, because my I have what I have done, I have called this to dot change name, and then based on that it will change the value. Let me check why it's not showing me the value of this, because if I see the setting method, this is my set method, right? I have given the name. Okay, the set function value, this has to be done. Let me check. Okay, let me run this. So I'm going to run. I will see. Okay, it's showing me a SAM, but it will give me a some error because okay, stu dot first name is not found. Uh, right. So this is how the problem is. Okay, so let's run it and we'll see. So you can see SAM, and after that change, because what I have done, we have called the setter method and using to change the name. Okay, So let me write down the syntax over here for your reference. Object defined property syntax. So remember that, so it will be helpful you. Object dot define property, object, property, and descriptor. Okay, so this is how you are going to use it. Okay, now let's talk about the next part which we are going to discuss is the JS prototype. We have already seen the prototype. Okay, but let's discuss some more in a detail of about the JavaScript prototype. So let me open another file. So now before learning a prototype, you should check these two tutorials which we have already discussed previously. One is a Java object, how the Java objects work and used in the JavaScript, and the second one is a constructor function. Okay, so these two we have already seen in this tutorial, and some of the example of the prototype we have also already seen to add the property and the function in the constructor by using a prototype. Now a little we'll go furthermore a little bit about that. Okay, so let's take an example. This let me save this first as JS prototype type.js. Okay, now this is my example, a standard example where I have created a one constructor function called a person, and using that object, the constructor function, I am creating two different objects over here. Okay, now let's say I have this, and what I'm going to do is I write down console.log. Inside that, if I say person dot prototype, okay, I saved it, and now let's run it. Let me write down the command node js drop ks, not js, right? We'll see this is saying console.log problem because console. Okay, why? Because we haven't used that is right. So this is why, and if I run it, you can see the person. This is how it's showing me, right? So every function and object has a property named property prototype by default. Okay, and in this example we are trying to access the prototype property of a person constructor function, and since the prototype property has no value at the moment, it shows an empty object. So this is why it's showing me this empty object over here. Okay, so it's always a default default property, prototype property for a constructor function. Okay, now prototype inheritance, we understand the prototype inheritance. So let me write down. Okay, so how the pro work, let's take this the same example over here. So what I'm going to do, person dot prototype dot gender. This is I'm going to use gender, and I say wait. So this is what I have done, right? Now if I write a console dot log, and inside that if I write person dot prototype, okay, and let me clear this one first, and now run it, and we'll see. Now what you have seen over here, previously we have a blank object, but now we have a person, with the property called gender and the value of this, right? Now let's move forward, and if I say console.log, and if I write down person1 dot gender, and the same thing which I say for log person2 dot gender, and we'll see what is the what will be our result. So you can see it will showing me a male and male. Okay, so in this example we have added a new property gender to the person constructor function using. Okay, so this is, you have seen this right over here. Now then object person1 and the person2 inherits the property gender from the prototype property of person constructor function. Okay, because now, because we have added to the prototype, so now it's inherit the prototype property of person constructor function which we have created over here, and we can see. So remember that the syntax to add the property to an object constructor function is, which we already seen, but still I am writing this over here: object constructor function equal to dot, or not equal to, dot prototype. Oh, sorry, yeah, prototype, and dot key which you want to add equal to the value. Okay, so this is the syntax which you need to use if you are in prototype. Okay, and remember a few points. So prototype is used to provide additional property to all the objects created from a constructor function. Okay, so this is value. Okay, so now let's see adding a method to a constructor function using a prototype. Okay, so in the same example, what we are going to do is we have a person dot prototype dot what we need to add. So I'm giving a name, greet. Okay, over there now I'm going to write a function. Okay, function, and in this inside this I need to write something, console dot log, and I would say hello. Okay, hello, and let's say some more few things over here. I would say this dot, and let me give a name. Okay, what we are using is a first name. Over here we are using a name. Okay, so we have to give the name, right? So this is what I have given. Now let's run it. Person1 dot greet, because this is what we have given function name. Now again we have given to person2 dot greet, right? And let's save it, right? So what I have done, I have, using a prototype, I have created a function. Okay, and now let's use it. Okay, so let me run it again and we'll see. So you can see hello John, hello John, because both are the objects which we are using it. Okay, now let's say if I want to change the prototype, if a prototype value is changed, then all the new objects will have the change property value. All the previously created object will have the previous value, for example. Okay, so now what we have done so far, we have this first called person object, where after that we have created one property using a prototype gender. Okay, but now what we are going to do, we are going to change the prototype value. Okay, so let's say what I'm going to do, I write person dot prototype dot age equal to, let's say, value 30. This is value I'm using. Okay, so what I have done, now I have changed it. So now after that I'm going to create another object. Okay, let's say person3 equal to new person. Now let's say, okay, now this is what I have done. Now console dot log, and I would say person3, okay, dot age. Okay, so this is how, see what would be the value come out. Okay, that's now you can see though something I have made a wrong thing. Okay, sorry. This won't be in this way. This, if I have to change the property value, okay, prototype value, sorry. So in that case, because I need to change the prototype value. Okay, so how I'm going to do that? So I need to write down over here prototype to curly braces, gender, and I would say male. Okay, and then we're going to run it, and we'll see the gender, right? So this is how we are going to run it, and we'll see. Let me clear this first, and now we'll run it. So you can see for object person 1 and the person 2, my values are this, but why I have changed the prototype, so that is why I am getting the value female over here, because the value of gender is changed for that particular object which is created after changing the value of prototype. Okay, so this is how we are doing it. Okay, now let's talk the last topic which we have is JavaScript prototype chaining. Okay, so basically what is, so if an object tries to access the same property that is in the constructor function and the prototype object, the object takes the property from the constructor function. Okay, so how we are going to, you want to see that. Okay, so let's take an example of that. I'll create another file. Okay, which is the name I give prototype name. Okay, so this is my name, name, and this is how we are going to use. So adding a property name Peter, property dot age, and if I run it, let's me clear this part. Okay, and write down node and prototype.js. You can see John and 23. So in this program, a property name is declared in the constructor function and also in the prototype property of the constructor function. Okay, when the program execute, person1 dot name looks like in the constructor function to see if there is a prototype named name. Since the constructor function has the name property with the John, the object takes value from the property. Okay, when the program execute, person dot age looks in the constructor function, see if there is a property name age. Since the constructor function doesn't have age property, the program looks into the prototype object of the constructor function and the object inherits property from the prototype object if available. Okay, so in this way we can use it. Okay, so so far we have seen, some of the most important topic when we work with the object, about the object getter and setter to values, the constructor, the functions, deep dive in the function itself. So for this tutorial we will end it the objects over here, and if you like this video so far, please hit the like button, and for our channel motivation, please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you can receive the notification for our new videos. Thanks you very much.